and made of silk and steel. By all marvel, no, get off my sheets. Chapter 11. We're missing something else, Natasha murmured, waving her hand to dismiss the documents uncovered for later second, third, and probably fourth examinations. Beyond hunting down the shitbags who did turn Cap's best friend into a mindless murder bot, Tony asked sarcastically, and sent him to terrorize a 7-year-old? Oh, we'll get to that, don't worry, she said silkily, and Tony took a moment to admire how terrifying she was. But I meant the 7-year-old in question, Stark. Barnes is a multi-million-dollar asset that took the span of a lifetime to cultivate. However, whoever is holding his leash now wants that boy, and they're willing to bring him out of storage to do it. Willing to let his face be seen all over the national news, just for the sake of acquiring him? So, genius, tell me, what use do these people have for a little boy from Hell's Kitchen? He gave her a startled look. Don't you mean Queens? Don't tell me you're having memory lapses, Miss Rushman. Natasha laced her fingers together and did a thing with her eyes. Right, still in red scare mode then. Maybe one of us has done our research, Stark. Tony eyed her suspiciously. I'm afraid to ask after that video you found of his mother, but I did look him up before that. His address is in Jackson Heights, Queens. Nope, you've got old information, Natasha said with evident satisfaction, making the pea pop from her mouth. He was born just a few streets away from this building, at Lenox Hill Hospital, born Baby Boy Jones on June 1st, 2013. Later named Peter Benjamin Parker, mother Jessica Jones. Baby Boy Jones? Tony repeated, face twisted in confusion. What the hell? When a child is born and the parent or parents haven't decided on a name yet, the hospital paperwork needs to be filled. The hospital will fill in the first name as baby girl or baby boy. She explained, bored. The first and middle name can be corrected later on. That doesn't explain why he suddenly acquired a completely different surname. He was adopted. Stunned, Tony blurted out, The state gave Catwoman a child willingly? He didn't want to say that she seemed like a rough woman, and Tony was the last person to ask about parenting skills. But he was also pretty sure that if anger was made into an Olympic sport, she could compete for silver, with the Hulk taking gold. Her real name is Jessica Jones, Natasha said with an amused smirk. And no, Stark, she really did make sweet little Peter. She's his birth mother, up until 6 weeks ago. His father wasn't listed on Peter's birth certificate, but the courts did a paternity test and the document was recently updated. Father Matthew Murdoch, his last adoptive guardian, has died, and his biological parents decided to step back in. It's very interesting, actually. They were never married, but I couldn't find any custody dispute filed for them with the other court documents. Verbal custody agreement, Tony said absently. It's a thing sometimes, normally. It requires 2 semi-functional adults who aren't assholes, though. During Tony's own childhood, there had been kidnapping attempts made on multiple occasions. None ever carried out successfully, thanks mainly to the service of Edwin Jarvis. It was one of the main reasons Tony had developed an aversion to being handed things. But in his case, those attempts were never about Tony himself. They were always about Howard. A 7-year-old wouldn't have anything to offer a decades-old terrorist organization, but what about his parents? You told me we've got an in now, that we've located the Winter Soldier manual, Tony said slowly. What do these people know about our Batman and Catwoman? The answer to that turned out to be more than even Anthony Stark could ever dream. Peter was starting to think that maybe this was what sick felt like. He told Mr. Castle the truth back there in South Dakota when Peter had told him he'd never been sick, but he had the feeling that this was something similar. He hadn't eaten anything but fast food for going on 5 days now. and he'd barely gotten more than a few hours of uninterrupted sleep, and nearly as long as that. He and May had eaten out a lot because she wasn't a very good cook, but he never had fast food for every single meal either. And his senses were going haywire from the card chases and the lack of sleep. He always seemed to feel like he was in danger now. And he was tired no matter what time of day it was. It took much longer than it usually would for Peter to fall asleep in the passenger seat, neck bent to an uncomfortable angle. The radio made Edward kind of twitchy for some reason, so at least it was quiet. He dreamt again and was startled to realize that he recognized what he was seeing. Judging by the abandoned car with the hole in the roof, this was the Missouri highway where Ed had evacuated them from the car as they were being shot. Time had slowed to an agonizing pace as Peter's head had cleared the roof, realizing mere moments before it happened that one of the shots was on the path to hit him in the neck, and scrambling into Ed's arms for protection before it struck. Ed had managed to jump from the car before the second and third shots could hit that closely again. It was strange to see the same place at dusk. Even stranger still was seeing his mother standing next to a blonde woman in a long blue coat, examining the remains of the car. The blonde woman was looking at his mom with concern, gas station coffee in both of their hands. He was with you for weeks and you never really knew that whole time? Mom shook her head, hand pressed to his forehead. She turned to watch Peter's dad coming closer. What can I say? He's his father's son, she said grimly, with a wry twist of her lips. I used to think it was because he was a lawyer, but all Murdochs have this strange talent for avoiding painful truths. You know, I can hear you, Dad said mildly. It was odd to see him without his white cane. Why didn't he have it? Am I wrong? Mom said, brow lifted. Not in this case, no, Dad said, lifting an object in his hand to show her. Peter's left shoe, which he didn't actually remember losing, but now that he saw it there in his father's hand, he realized he was no longer wearing it anymore. Dad looked really sad, too, almost as sad as he was when Peter saw him on TV. She took the shoe from him. Peter had never seen Mom afraid before. He didn't like it. Wasn't there anything else? Dad shook his head. Finding might be our specialty, but I can't make him appear out of thin air. Ed lifted him gently from the seat, but Peter startled awake at the movement anyway, sweating and his head still aching from the after effects of spending days on inadequate food and inadequate sleep on top of overusing his abilities for the first time in his life. Lowly, Ed murmured strange words that Peter couldn't understand, all nonsense, but spoken in a soothing tone so that he relaxed against his shoulder. Ed was all hard muscle and metal, and it made Peter wish a bit guiltily for his dad. Also mostly muscle, but Edward smelled like gunfire, steel, motor oil, and old blood, and Dad smelled, well, that smelled right. Peter shuddered, feeling an aching wave of ice go through him, piercing him like the cold never could. Petya, Ed murmured in Russian, hoisting him higher on his hip. Peter, even in his state, noticed that Edward seemed completely comfortable holding him, which was odd. A hot knife sliced through the back of Peter's neck again, cutting him through with danger, danger, danger. Ed, he cried weakly. God, his head was just killing him right now. There's... A crack of sound split the silence of the empty streets near the Hudson Yards. He wanted to howl with the unfairness of the whole situation as time slowed and then crawled again. Frantically, Peter looked around them for the gunman in the window, 3 stories over across the street. The round was on the direct path to hit Ed in the back of the skull, right at the base of his spine. As his vision began to speed forward again, Peter gripped handfuls of the lank brown hair hanging around Ed's face and pulled, yanking his head down and out of the way just in time for it to fly into a cracked window behind them. Swearing in Russian, Ed dropped him to the ground and stood on guard in front of Peter as he grabbed hold of his gun, eyes streaming with pain as the pressure of his skull tripled. Peter croaked, "Third floor, right side." He flinched, hugging Edward's legs as he fired once, twice, and then Peter found himself being lifted again, hiding his face against Ed's neck, knowing that he had just helped to kill at least one person. "We'll find your mom," Ed whispered, sounding more and more familiar to Peter's ear, like he'd be a neighbor from just down the street. "Come on, Petya." "Inside," he said, eyes tightly squeezed shut. "Please hurry." "You got it, kid." Kid? Wow, Ed was really rebooting fast now. Or maybe he was imitating Mr. Castle? It wasn't a very good imitation in that case. There weren't enough bad words in it. "Petya." Ed shook him gently. "Oh, that must be me. You have to tell me where it's safe to sleep, Petya." If this experience was good for nothing else, it had taught Peter how to classify the various signals of pain throughout his body and what they meant in the world around him. He pointed toward a particularly tragic-looking building made of half-crumbling brick. Like him, Ed also didn't seem as concerned by the November temperatures as a normal human might be, so he hoped he wouldn't mind too much. Peter felt absolutely terrible, sick to his stomach from the pain in his head, and more tired than he'd ever been able to recall before, but he forced himself to eat at least one of the granola bars from the gas station that Ed handed to him. "We need to find your parents," he muttered, tucking Peter inside his own jacket. Beneath the sweatshirt, he could feel the hard edges of the tactical vest Ed wore underneath. "Can't yet," he whispered, barely audible even to himself. "Bad people. I'll take care of it." "Oh, good," Peter thought, dropping his head back onto Edward's chest. More murder. Government surveillance was a terrifying thing. Tony knew that it happened with alarming regularity, and it was his very firm belief that there should be much stricter rules and procedures around the practice. What he had not known before looking into these files was that a lot of those rules and regulations tended to be waved around if you or someone you loved happened to have special powers. "This is the government," Natasha whispered as they found more and more and more candid information. "This has to go all the way to the government, Stark. It's too comprehensive." "You aren't telling me anything I don't know," he murmured back, eyes wide at the well of information in front of him. "I wonder what the hell date of incident is supposed to be. She was 16? Jessica Campbell-Jones. See also, Elisa June Campbell-Jones, Kevin Douglas Thompson, Peter Benjamin Parker, Carl Samuel Lucas, Matthew Michael Murdoch, Patricia Charlize Walker. Born December 15th, 1990. Mother, Elisa June Campbell-Jones, deceased. Father, Brian Timothy Jones, deceased. Guardian, Dorothy K. Monroe Walker. Issue, see file, Peter Benjamin Parker. Date of incident, June 28th, 2007. Threat level, high to very high. While never formally trained, the subject is extremely strong for her height, weight, and musculature. Possesses a high pain tolerance, as well as damage resistance, and some increased healing speed and reflexes. Jung and Song believe she may also possess some undefined sixth sense ability. Has an uncanny ability to evade our rapid detection and locating methods. Has previously proved herself able to commit to permanently removing an adversary, but will only do so if confronted with an inescapable existential crisis. Kevin Douglas Thompson. Rampant alcohol abuse. May have inherited her mother's tendency to dissolve into episodes of extremely violent psychosis. Although she has mastered her strength enough to avoid causing accidental damage to fragile objects and is a keen investigator, she is found to be stubborn, willful, temperamental, and dismissive of authority. Acquisition not recommended. Subject would require near constant memory wipes and massive amounts of antipsychotics to keep her compliant. Even with these precautions, she would always be a high risk to whichever agent became her handler. Low reward to risk ratio. Leverage Patricia Walker. Update 5/17/2018. Patricia Charlize Walker. Sterling Adams. Malcolm Ducasse. Claire Temple. Karen Page. Franklin Nelson. Evaluation. Healing 7. Damage resistance 7. Pain resistance 7. Strength 8. Speed 6. Reflexes 6. Skills 3. Senses 3. Intelligence 8. Other 3. Total value 58 out of 100. Moderate. Subject would require near constant memory wipes and massive antipsychotics, Tony repeated back as his eyes kept moving down. They kept a leverage listening for her. Natasha, the redhead nodded. They aren't just watching them. They're trying to find themselves another Sergeant Barnes. Looks like Jones doesn't quite fit their mold. Rampant alcohol abuse, a keen investigator, stubborn, willful, temperamental, and dismissive of authority. She reads off, then smirked at him. If I didn't know any better, Stark, I'd think they were talking about you. Hardy har har. He rolled his eyes, then gave her a quick sideways glance. They have an attached video file for her. She gave him an impatient look and Tony opened it. It should be said that Jessica's strength was everything they had described and more. Natasha also believed that she was completely untrained. She had no technique, and there was not an inch of grace or skill anywhere in her movements. There was strength and only strength, so much of it actually, that there were moments where her one human body could barely seem to keep it all contained, where it was almost an entity within itself, trying to escape from her narrow bones and long limbs, but she did hold it in check. The group of men may have had concussions, bruises, and even broken bones, but their injuries would be completely survivable. Jessica snapped and snarled and split their lips open, but they would all live. She picked up grown men 3 times her size and tossed them around like pillows. When the remaining men in the group tried to flee, picked up a moving vehicle and refused to let them leave, with an expression of such dismissive disdain that it was nearly admirable. One of the idiots in question tried to tase her, and Jessica just looked freaking bored. She's fantastic, Tony breathed. Can we introduce her to Fury? Please, please. I'm not saying she even has to be on the team. I literally just want to watch his expression as she gets her jaws around him, chews him up, and spits him out. Kinky, Natasha said dryly. But her expression was concerned rather than amused. This project, how can they be watching Peter's father? Huh? She backtracked to explain. Peter's birth father, Stark, he's a blind man with a law office in the kitchen. Does mostly pro bono work. But they're watching him, Tony said, brows raised high. So obviously that's not all he is. Matthew Michael Murdoch. See also Stick, Jessica Campbell Jones, Carl Samuel Lucas, Peter Benjamin Parker. Born January 12, 1991. Mother Margaret Grace Robinson Murdoch. Father Jonathan Michael Murdoch, deceased. Guardian, State of New York. Issue NA, update 9/22/2018. See file Peter Benjamin Parker. Date of incident April 3rd, 2000. Threat level, high to very high. Alert, no audio contact of any kind. Monitor must report only in visual media or written statements. The subject has trained as a child with a man known as Stick. Limited information available since this person predates all methods of tracking. Attempts to place any audio surveillance on Stick has led to the deaths of no less than 9 agents. Despite verified medical blindness, the subject is able to detect humans and objects by sense of smell and audio cues, even from far distances. Increased reflexes and speed and slightly elevated recovery times are noted as well. Audio detection is very high, amounting to near negation of the visual defect, and combined with moderately heightened reflexes can be at times border the edge of precognition. Pain tolerance is extraordinary and makes him nearly impossible to take down at close or mid-range. The subject displayed from an early age evidence of attachment difficulties likely caused by his mother's early abandonment, as well as a mistrust of others and an almost sociopathic impulse to lie to those close to him. In his early 20s, began to display shockingly violent outbursts, culminating in his debut as Daredevil. Though he was previously assessed as stable, his increasing bloodlust and apparent skill at torture and interrogation have now placed him in the unstable range. However, Murdoch has proved that he is unable to make a killing blow, even when it would save him, even when his leverage people are threatened. Possible suicidal ideation has been prevalent during multiple points in his life. Devout Catholic since early childhood, not compatible with mission ideology. Acquisition not recommended. Huge range of detection and marked ability to fight beyond grievous injuries would make capture difficult, and noted suicidal tendencies would likely cause the subject to make every attempt to end his own life whenever he had even the slightest level of awareness of his position. Leverage. Paul Latham, Franklin Nelson, Electra Nachios, Claire Temple, Karen Page. Evaluation: Healing 5, Damage Resistance 5, Pain Resistance 9, Strength 4, Speed 5, Reflexes 5, Skill 8, Senses 8, Intelligence 8, Other 2. Total value 59 out of 100, Moderate. You are shitting me, Tony murmured. Daredevil? Batman is actually Daredevil? I've already seen clips of Daredevil, Natasha. Half of the time he's a brutal, unhinged maniac. He is not a blunt Catholic lawyer. Natasha gestured airily at the video file on hand. There was no mistaking that it was Peter's father. The beginning had a very clear shot of his whole face, and those ears Peter had were apparently genetic, along with the messy brown hair. Hopefully the kid was also grow into his own like his dad did. His head was tilted to the side, probably listening to something outside the room if the notes on his senses and abilities were correct. The video of Matt Daredevil, it would seem, was even more shocking and terrifying than the one they kept on Jessica. Matt had only a fraction of Jessica's strength, but what she lacked in skill and technique, he had in spades. The assessment also hadn't lied about another thing. The man completely freaking refused to stay down. That wasn't to say that he didn't go down, because Matt spent half of the video getting the absolute shit kicked out of him by half the dozen men in prison uniforms, but he never stopped fighting, no matter how many times he was kicked in the ribs or how many walls his head got slammed into. And the more injuries he sustained, the more freaking pissed off he seemed to get, until blow by blow the blind lawyer got stripped away and there was nothing but a man with blood running down his nose, slamming tables into men and throwing them head first into cabinets. Tony winced at the sound of Matt breaking one inmate's hand, and then his arm winced again at the sound of his breathing as he remained the last man conscious in the room, loud frantic pants with the edge of a wheeze with every inhale and exhale. Oof, Tony knew what cracked ribs sounded like. Matt fumbled back up to standing, limbs still shaking subtly, before snatching a bit of torn paper covering from the hospital bed from the ground and wiping his bloodied face. He spat a few more droplets of blood out of his mouth, looking furiously satisfied with himself, and stumbled from the room. Jesus Christ, Tony murmured. As crazy as it was to believe that a blind lawyer was apparently fighting crime dressed as a devil in Hell's Kitchen, those moves had been Daredevil's moves. This pair was hissing, spitting, frenzied, blood-soaked demons. Were his little Iron Baby's parents. He isn't Leverage, he said out loud, puzzled. Both of his parents have multiple unrelated people as Leverage listings. But despite being their own kid, Peter isn't a Leverage asset. Stark. Natasha met his gaze. He has his own file, and I want to see the file they're keeping on Peter Parker. Peter Benjamin Parker. Born June 1st, 2013. Mother Jessica Campbell Jones. Father unknown. Update Matthew Michael Murdoch. Guardian Richard Parker and Mary Wallace Parker. Margarita Rosetta Parker. Matthew Michael Murdoch and Jessica Campbell Jones. Issue nothing NA. Date of incident NA. Classified mutant. Threat level unknown. Assume high. Alert. No surveillance closer than 4 blocks is permitted for the subject. Born of subject Jessica Campbell Jones. Father unknown. Conception appears to be a result of a one-time event. Surveillance placed for further study. Update. The subject is able to detect surveillance objects placed within his environment within several hundred meters of his body. Observed fussing and crying excessively whenever agents are physically present in its area. Unable to acquire eyewitnesses' accounts. Further study needed. Update. Video footage captured confirms that the subject possesses his mother's enhanced strength, speed, and reflexes, motor control nearly on par with a fully developed adult observed at age 4. Still unable to capture close-line surveillance footage without detection, the subject possesses some sort of sixth sense which enables him to detect enemy presences. Bomb threat confirms this ability. Reasoning and awareness also seems near comparable to a teenager or young adult. The subject is highly desirable, eager for adult approval, perfect for acquisition. However, his birth mother's continued presence within the area may make this very difficult. Mother is protective and clearly very attached to him, despite keeping her distance. Returned to subject at later date. Update. Subject's birth father has now been confirmed by continued presence and association with birth mother Matthew Michael Murdoch. Subject has continued to mature in his abilities and is still highly desirable. Acquisition very strongly not recommended. Both parents highly likely to search for offspring. And retaliate to any attempts to remove him. Both are now monitoring the subject from a distance, and the subject's powers do not appear to view either of his biological parents as a threat, despite seeming unaware of their presence. Notes by L. Morton. Do Parker's powers recognize his parents as allies because they recognize their own genetic origins and view them as natural protectors? More information needed on threat detection. Update. Attempting to remove current guardian to gain legal access to the subject has caused a major backfire. Elimination of May Parker has caused Murdoch and Jones to step in to regain custody of him. Profiles and previous history on both parents strongly suggests that any attempt to remove Parker from their care will be met with a violent and relentless series of retaliations. The subject is now outside of reach unless a major event can separate him from his parents and other adults surrounding him. Standby. Leverage. Edward Leeds, Franklin Nelson, Karen Page, Claire Temple. Evaluation. Healing 10, damage resistance 9, pain resistance 6. Strength 9, speed 8, reflexes 10, skill 3, senses 10, intelligence 10, other 10. Total value 85 out of 100, very high. You are wrong, Stark, Natasha murmured, and a little bit right at the same time as usual. What? Tony said numbly, trying to absorb all of the facts in their whole. The stat measures they were keeping on the boy were insane, like something he might find in one of his teammates, not in a little boy. They don't want Peter because of his parents, she said quietly, but they want him because his parents, because of what his parents gave him. Completely by accident. The subject possesses his mother's enhanced strength, speed, and reflexes, motor control nearly on par with a fully developed adult observed at age 4. Reasoning and awareness also seem near comparable to a teenager or young adult. Silently, they both remembered the way Jessica's body barely seemed able to contain the vast power of her strength. The light of the anger in her face has never seemed to dim. Matt's self-satisfied fury as his eyes blindly swept over the room and he spat blood onto the floor. Hoarsely, Tony said, "These people think Jones and Murdoch have made them the perfect weapon. And they did. If even half of this is true, they made a nuclear bomb in the form of a tiny human. But holy shit, they wanted to make little Peter into a robo-zombie like Bucky Barnes." "Natasha, I don't think that's the way they're gonna see it. He's their baby." "Hey, Stark," Clint said, Jarvis allowing the voice message to go through. "Did Natasha tell you that I was trying to tag your Iron Baby and RoboCop with surveillance?" Almost afraid, Tony glanced at Natasha before he said, Yeah, Legolas, what you got?" Clint laughed quietly. "Not what, Stark, who?" I'm almost afraid to ask, Katniss. You ever heard of this guy called the Punisher?" He could almost hear the bird-brain smirk. "I caught up with him because it looks like he just had a short-term gig as a babysitter and he's agreed to have a chat with us in exchange for me not throwing him in prison." Hey, cool it. I said chat, man. Don't try to freaking stab me again either, or I can have Captain America come down here and look disappointed at you, and nobody wants that. It's unfreaking believable. Trust me. It absolutely was unfreaking believable, because Tony and Natasha had to tell Captain America that his friend was tortured and brainwashed and had tried to capture a child when they all went to have this chat with the Punisher. "Just Castle," the man said flatly, visibly making a valiant effort not to roll his eyes. He nodded at the picture they'd shown him of Sergeant Barnes, taken from the Winter Soldier file, while he was still being held in cryostasis. "Yup, that's Ed." "Ed?" Steve repeated, understandably edgy, despite Bruce's best efforts to keep him calm while their teammates went digging. "The kid named him that," Castle had said, and this time he did roll his eyes, though he didn't really look angry. "Some show. He said it was a guy with a metal arm, Edward from Full Metal something." "Edward Elric," Tony said, laughing despite himself and shaking his head, "from Full Metal Alchemist. My protege has good taste." "Yeah," Castle was giving him a look, assessing, suspicious. Like Peter's parents, despite his nasty reputation, it was clear that the man liked Peter and cared about what happened to him. "That motherfucker shot out the tires in my car. Whole damn thing flipped over with me, the kid, and the dog inside." "That's what we'd like to talk to you about, actually," Natasha cut in, first glancing at Tony. He was with her all the way, and then Steve, who was looking worried. "I'm sure you can understand that Captain Rogers would really like to bring Sergeant Barnes in without causing him serious injury or scaring Peter. Do you have any idea who his current master is?" They were all taken aback when Frank Castle began laughing, a hoarse, dry chuckle that was rusty and disused, but it was still undeniably a laugh. "I love a good joke," Tony said dryly. "Won't you let us in on it?" "I scrambled his brains with a modified taser." Castle admitted it with zero shame. Tony was starting to think these street-level guys were the ones really having all the fun. Wasn't the same after that. Gentle as a lamb, but his brain was emptier than a gambler's purse. So I pretty much lost my shot to figure out who sent him out there. "So you don't know either?" Steve asked. Oh no. There it was, the disappointed face of Captain America. "Oh no, I do know. That's what made it funny," Castle said calmly. "Maybe it's because he was nice to him, or maybe it's because he's adult kryptonite, but now that I've erased his whatever programming, now that he's halfway back to himself, I guess, well, Barnes thinks that the kid is his master." End of chapter.